from Kyiv. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Had a quiet day here. No, not really. Actually, we got bombed. We had the drone attacks, including 2 killed, air raids all day long, missile attacks starting at 12:30 at night with no air raid. Actually, it was boom before air raid. So we've had that kind of thing going on. But tonight we're going to talk to Glenn Kirschner, and I want to kind of bridge a little bit of the reality. So if I can get my little headphones set up here. Bridge the reality that I live here in Ukraine, in Kyiv, with the situation in America that is, you know, both, as people say, when America catches cold, the world coughs, or whatever it is. Never get those things right. I had a bad habit when I was a kid of distorting those sayings on purpose just for a comedic grin, and then it stuck. As they say, where there's a will, there's money. So if you look at like the NATO forum today, Trump is weak. Well, it's actually a good thing because the other countries are strong. The other countries are stepping up and they recognize his weakness. They recognize his senility, his fragility, and his corruption. And they've learned how to play it. Leslie in California, thank you, my Vishivanka. This is actually my official, what I think of as my official work shirt, although it's got these kind of faux shoulder things. I actually do have shoulders, so it's weird. If it doesn't do the thing just right, it feels a little odd. I'm still in the kitchen studio instead of the studio because although it is remarkably cool right now, it's a cool 60 degrees here in Kyiv. Go figure. Just happens to be. But if I move everything in there, what will happen is next week it'll jump back up in the higher numbers. And I might as well just hang in here. Got a nice draft between the rooms, and very thankful for a at least quiet evening. Hope you're doing well wherever you're chiming in from. And again, Glenn Kirschner will join us so that we can have a discussion on the status of not just the Justice Department in America, but really the status of America in the sense that when the institutions start to fail, and more importantly, I think what I'm concerned with is when the people kind of try to turn to the institutions and have developed a sense of helplessness. Because in Ukraine, in 2014 onwards, people really understood that the government had to answer to them. And I'm not saying it's really a universal sentiment, like every single person is some sort of charged woke. I don't mean like woke in the left-right political spectrum, but just woke in the sense like, hey, we're not going back to the old ways of pre-Yanukovych, etc. Um, the officials know to be responsible to the people. Now, one of the things I'll bring up in a little bit is that whereas we have yet to see a notable figure at the federal level to be arrested, charged, etc. Here in Ukraine, we have Andriy Yermak back May 14th was arraigned and still being held. Essentially, an assistant directly to Volodymyr Zelensky. The scandals around those areas are not fun. They're hard during war, but they happen. And think about that. A country that's fighting for its existential reality directly confronts the problems in a way that a country that doesn't feel like it has to, the United States, doesn't bother. And I think this has been kind of a metaphor all along. So tonight we're going to explore that a bit. And thank you for being here. Had a very, 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 very long, busy day. I've been transcribing. I've been editing. I'm actually publishing the full video for the Colombian group Los Yankeveros, if you know who they are. A really fun kind of. I actually love Yanko and the guys and Isabel. Colombian group that plays Ukrainian music in order to troll Russians, and it's fun. It's also good spirited because if you ever watch Yanko, when he runs into a fairly hateful or angry Russian, he's always polite. He's at polite level I can't achieve easily. And I filmed them last October. They're coming back, so we had to put the whole thing together. And I've been doing that. Plus, preparing our interview series. We are actually having a very busy July. I haven't left the city yet because our camera guy got delayed in Germany. He'll be going into Poland tonight, I think, and then get his train into here and all that stuff. Chris, why don't you leave Ukraine? This is why I don't leave. I don't deal with those logistical problems. But in some seriousness, in the other side, there are a lot of items that are being solved real time. Like, we are now going to be filming at the War Museum. We have actually scheduled an interview I mentioned earlier in my afternoon broadcast video, an interview with my friend Volodymyr Zemshukov. And Volodymyr Zemshukov is a partisan expert. He was a partisan, meaning he had to fight as a civilian against Russian occupied forces in 2014, was captured, lost his limbs, his eyesight was restored, but he's a good friend of mine. We're finally doing our interview with him. And one of the things I want to say ahead of time before Glenn comes on is it's because guys like him know me as an independent journalist who knows I'm the chief. I'm the chief of this news operation. They also know I'm a former counterterrorism kind of serious thinker about like really getting something done with news, not just sort of passively aggregating information. And a whole lot of those parts are coming together kind of all at once, which is why I want to thank especially those who held on when we were struggling to push through, which we still are financially always because it's a team effort on that level. And I see a few of you who make that happen. So thank you. One question was, do I ever meet up with Terrell during Star when he's there? Yes. And if Terrell sees this, I'll just say it in front of everyone, not enough. I traveled most of the first month of 2022 with Terrell. And I actually sort of really do love that we live very different lives. And it's not intentional per se, but I also like to give certain people their lane, respect and observe without a lot of overlap so as to really, from my end, enjoy him. And then also selfishly from my end to enjoy my life, like, but it seems counterintuitive to me because actually Terrell, our worldview is actually really closely aligned. I'm a black liberationist, so there's a lot of things that he covers. I'm like, right on, man. Like that's like he listened into some of mine, and I think maybe he was a little surprised that I was um, as vocal as I am. But like I'm basically what's called a race traitor. If you look at my skin, I don't like the term white. It just doesn't work. And all these items. And then our brothers, he maybe fresh off of our wonderful brother Dean Obadala. Dean is such a amazing energy, isn't he?
Oh, Dean is the best. Yeah, I enjoy joining him on his Substack.
Well, I'm glad I got to watch some of it because it took off the plate a lot of things I don't have to cover back with you. So welcome back, first off, and good to see you.
Good to see you.
When we left, we were talking about SPLC, and you guys covered that, and there's a few of those parts there I will kind of cover. But I told the audience as we were getting ready to start on here that I really want to bridge the gap of the world I live in Ukraine and the world that you're covering in America, my beloved homeland. I'm from Texas, and we kind of can be a little patriotic by nature somehow. And I said that in May 14th, Andriy Yermak, the assistant to President Volodymyr Zelensky, was arrested. He was seriously held. The country wants him to be properly held accountable. And the country I'm in is an existential combat for its own life. But the country I come from, yeah, can't seem to get much action on those levels. So I want to really clash those things on purpose with you here, of all people, because brother, you've done a great job with Team Justice. I think everyone here should commend you for just being our champion. Like really, I don't know where you get the energy. I sort of do because I live in a war. But tell us, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing okay, and thank you for those kind words, Chris. I feel like, I am far less at risk here than you are over there, and I'm happy to talk about the rule of law and how it's faring these days, and would also love at some point, without wanting to hijack your show, to
It's
ask you
our
some,
show.
yeah,
Yeah, plenty
ask
of
you
ways to
some
do it. Yeah.
questions about your circumstances and what you're experiencing over there, and even
Yeah.
what caused you to begin living over there. But, you know, we are also in one hell of a crisis here in the US, as everybody well knows, because we have an abjectly corrupt and criminal president, as aided and abetted in both the practical and legal senses of that term by cabinet officials who themselves are violating both our nation's laws and the Constitution. Of course, Donald Trump wants to make one of his henchmen, his consigliere, his dirty lawyer, Todd Blanche, the permanent attorney general for the United States. And he is the antithesis of what the American people want, need, and deserve in an attorney general. So we are in a fight for, and I know this would sound hyperbolic in other times, we're in a fight for American democracy. We're in a fight for our
Right.
republic. We're trying desperately to keep it. And, you know, I always try to bring a lot of optimism to any conversation, realistic optimism. I'm determined that we're going to keep our republic, but it's going to take all of us. That's why we have Team Justice. And, you know, Team
Amen.
Justice, people gravitate toward this mission. And we talk about not only the rule of law, but how we can all engage in this fight in ways that are not always intuitive. And frankly, they're not always easy, but there are a lot of ways out there that every single person, regardless of your abilities, regardless of your comfort level involving yourself in public protests and things of that nature, there are things we can all do to fight for a healthy democracy, and we've got to do it. It's up to us. There's no sitting on the sidelines anymore.
I completely agree with you. And one of the things I was meditating about with your particular being, who you are, is what made you decide to be a justice warrior to begin with, of all the things you could have done. But I want to merge it with something on purpose. I know you did this cool trip to Alaska with Frank, where you get to talk to people like the ones who came here to watch tonight. And what is it that you see in them that you can merge with, like, the career you chose and then the interest that they bring to the table when they sign up to go on a cruise to learn these things? What is that connection, and what did that teach you so far?
And Chris,
If that makes some sense.
let me put this cruise thing in context, because listen, I was a Fed for 30 years and 6 months, and
Mhm,
then it was a
mhm.
difficult decision to retire because I loved what I was doing. I loved serving the American people. Um, as people may know, federal lawyers, federal prosecutors do not get rich. Indeed, we kind of hit the salary cap after about 15 years, the federal salary cap, and then in a very real sense, we make less each year if you adjust for inflation. And my friends were leaving the Department of Justice after 3, 4, 5 years and going making the big bucks in private practice, quadrupling their
Mhm.
salary overnight. But for me, it was never about money. Maybe because I came from no money. My pop was a high school football coach. He was an
I can
army
relate,
guy.
sure.
He was an army guy. He, you know, and he instilled a lot of very important values in me. And I think I followed in his footsteps because I really wanted to serve in the army. I really wanted to be in law enforcement in some capacity, but I never wanted to be a police officer. I wasn't interested in carrying a gun on my hip and a badge on my chest and ordering people out of their car, though that is a very important job, and I honor those who do it
Right.
ethically, and most of them do it ethically. They're real protect and serve people. And that's kind of how the prosecution piece um, came into my life, because it's like, you know, that's
Mhm.
still law enforcement, but it's law enforcement in the courtroom and in the grand jury and dealing with victims of crime and protecting and defending the Constitution when perhaps police officers or fellow prosecutors violate it, right? Step a toe over a constitutional line and fail to honor the rights of the defendants that we are investigating or prosecuting. So for me, it felt like a win-win. I could kind of do the right thing for all reasons. Um, and then the cruise thing. So Frank Figluzzi, retired FBI agent, wonderful
Yeah.
national security analyst. We were both MSNBC analysts for many years. And he calls me up one day. He's like, Glenn, hear me out. Um, there's an opportunity for us to co-host a justice themed cruise. It was actually to the Mediterranean, not to Alaska, but I'll get to Alaska in a
Oh,
minute.
that's right,
And
that's
are
right.
you interested in hosting a cruise with me? And I'm like, who is this? This is not Frank Figluzzi. And sure enough, we were invited to host a cruise. And Chris, all of these, you know, they're justice warriors. All of these people from
Exactly,
all walks of life came
exactly.
on the cruise with us, and we got to spend
Yeah,
10 days with them doing lectures and Q&As and happy hours and getting to know them. And, when you're on a cruise ship, you really get to know them because you're seeing them every minute of every day. And to a person, they are just the folks who are sick over what's going on in this country, and they want to find ways to help make it right. The rule of law, a loyalty to the Constitution, but even more fundamentally, things like decency and diversity and kindness and inclusivity and fairness and equality. And so the team justice thing just kind of grows over time. We're on Substack every night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, having a community meeting. I've seen you attend some of them, and we just
Yeah, I'm
talk.
sometimes laying there waiting for the bombs to come, and I got you in there with my lullaby music.
Yeah.
Knowing
So
and I will say it gives me a sense of calm when I know that you guys have when you're on point and you've got and I mean almost like in a military sense, when you're literally on point and you've got the helm, I can rest knowing that at least there's someone doing the right thing.
And what we're trying to do is make sure we remain aware and on top of all of the legal transgressions of this administration, and that we are prepared to go on the reform, repair, and accountability mission come January 2029. As long as we all get out and do our job at the polls, both at the midterms and in the general election, the rule of law will come back into the light of day in January 2029. However, if we don't take accountability seriously this time, Chris, we didn't take it seriously in 74 with Nixon. We didn't take it seriously in 2021 with Trump and his criminal associates. If we fail on the accountability mission again, I don't believe we get to keep our republic. I really don't. I'm very pessimistic about that.
I feel we failed in 1865 by not keeping the South accountable, and I'm the offspring of at least 5 Confederate soldiers, so we'll go to that realm a whole another day. Um, there's at least 2 types of case areas I'd like to talk about, but always want to give you plenty of area to just tell us what you see out there. And of course, I said this is our discussion, so you're free to like pull things back and forth to Ukraine at whim. But this Antifa case that now just had an additional sentencing of the guy carrying magazines.
Yeah.
When I'm generally concerned as a 12-year counterterrorism analyst of people who kill people. Okay, so I know what Antifa is or isn't, and I know what the enemy is or isn't. And they got out, they got a slush fund, but the other guys are being attacked. So my biggest concern with that is what's not being taken care of. That's an actual danger, the atom weapons, and the real dangers. The second part, not at this moment, we'll start with this one, but is the like the I do have that financial report from Trump. And it's just devastating to think of the word corruption when I hear it thrown in
Yeah.
Ukraine to go, please stop with this word corruption. I have the receipts of the president of the United States. So those 2 areas are really what I want to deal with a bit is so let's talk about this Antifa rendering and what you think of what the audience needs to take away from it that's besides just the headline of it.
Yeah. So this prosecution out in Texas, which, I think they tacked on and threw around the term Antifa gratuitously because they sensed they could get away with it. But at
Hmm.
its core, and mind you, I have not sat down and absorbed all of the evidence that was introduced during the course of the trial. So I'm going to talk a
Sure.
little bit in generalities. Um, it looks like there were multiple alleged conspiracy members, right? And
Mhm.
a conspiracy was charged. I believe a federal agent ended up getting shot during the course of this incident that they alleged was part of a conspiracy. And here's the thing, Chris, conspiracy law can be a prosecutor's best friend and most vital tool when we're going after actual criminal conspiracies, not
Right.
protesters who are maybe banding together to protest
Mhm.
against overreach and abuse by the federal government, by masked marauders who we see every day caught on cell phones violating both state law, not to mention federal law, and the constitutional rights of protesters. People who,
Mhm.
you can say this is a conspiracy, but what most of these gatherings look like are people exercising their First Amendment free speech rights, their right to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances, because boy, if ever we had us some grievances, it's right
Right.
now. But here is the problem. Many of these alleged co-conspirators pleaded guilty. And when you have, and one went to trial and was convicted, maybe more than one. But and one was a cooperating witness and flipped and testified against the other defendants. When you have an insider to a
Mhm.
conspiracy that you've managed to flip and convert to a cooperating witness, it breathes life and apparent legitimacy
Hmm.
into the whole conspiracy claim because now one of their own is validating
Sure.
to the jury's satisfaction. Yes, we were in a criminal conspiracy. And the reach of conspiracy liability is long because you
Wow.
could be, let me use a easier to
Sure.
grasp example. If you have a conspiracy to rob a bank, and let's say I get two of my buddies. I say, okay, you steal the getaway car that we're going to use to go to and from the bank heist. You get a gun and give it to me. I'm going to be the gunman. I'm going to go in and I'm going to rob the bank. I go in, I rob the bank, and I shoot a bank teller or a guard, and that person dies. But the other guy, the other co conspirator, did nothing but get a car to be the getaway driver. Guess what? He is just as guilty of murder
Pretty much.
as
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
because that's the reach of co-conspirator liability. And the notion behind it in the law is that things are more dangerous when multiple people get together to violate our laws. So everybody,
Sure.
you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. So that is why so much of what went on in the Texas case seems so, at a minimum, draconian and unfair and heavy-handed and abusive and overreach. But once you have insiders who are pleading guilty and at least one flipping and testifying against the other, it doesn't really matter that you're throwing Antifa around. That's beside the point. You're satisfying conspiracy law. And it looks like that is what resulted in those convictions and those heavy sentences that were handed down. Now, I don't think they're going to get away with that in courts across the country. And let me tell you, the judge who presided over that case is
Hmm.
a George W. Bush appointee. I'm not here to
Hmm.
badmouth him, but when I read up on him, not only is he a Federalist Society type, which doesn't automatically disqualify him, mind you,
Sure.
but he is also regularly reversed on appeal, and he is known as an ideologue, which is not a good thing for a judge to be known for. So, listen, this may not be over.
So
There
on
may
an
be
on an
some,
appeal, yeah, on an
yeah,
appeal, there may be a an attorney comes up and says, "Hey, look, this guy already didn't like them anyway."
yeah. Or he made rulings that were prejudicial and wrong. And
Right.
so
Right.
the case gets busted on appeal, not at all unusual, and remanded to the trial court for a new trial, perhaps in front of a new judge. So this
Right.
war is not over, even if the couple of battles have been lost in the trial court.
Right. And I will say to our viewers, as a guy who worked in counterterrorism studies, meaning basically I infiltrated a lot of forums and I monitored thousands and thousands of stuff. But I saw people who were not the MAGA side doing things that were they need to watch it because
Yeah.
they too will cross in those lines. And I've cited like William Van Spronson, 69-year-old guy who threw a Molotov cocktail in Iceman a few years ago. Guy ghosted for doing that. I said, oh well, don't do it. Um, so yeah, there are some people who just cross that line. Well, let me point out additional factor in your thought on this is how we have federal investigators showing up at people's houses over social media posts.
Yeah.
And as a prosecutor, what would that look like at your desk when you were practicing at your level? And I know you focused on homicides, so and that's
Yeah.
important because there's a lot of types of law out there. But in the case of what you had, if you had such a thing where along the lines these tactics you see playing out across the country under federal agents, no less, what would that look like if it was back at your hands later? Would you be
So,
yelling at somebody?
well, first of all, this is probably not the kind of thing that reaches a prosecutor. What do I mean by that?
Hmm.
Law enforcement of all flavors, federal, local,
Hmm.
and in DC. First of all, people may know the federal prosecutors. I was one for decades. Are also the
Hmm.
local prosecutors. So I was both a
Right,
traditional
right,
federal
right, right.
prosecutor and I was a district attorney for the District of Columbia. So
Right.
we did it all. But and as a federal
And you were
prosecutor,
busy over there.
oh
I
yeah.
know that, sir. Very
Unfortunately, the
busy.
murder business was always way too good in
Cool.
DC. Um, but as a federal prosecutor, we dealt with the FBI, DEA, ATF, Park Police, Capitol Police, Secret Service Uniform Division, postal inspectors, postal police, Marshal Service, Federal Protective Service, Metro Police, Amtrak Police, Smithsonian Police, and on and on and on.
Wow.
We were one-stop shopping for all law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C. Here's why I say this kind of thing would never reach my desk. All of those law enforcement agencies can do what we call knock and talks. They can go to
Okay.
somebody's house if they think there might be not only criminal activity afoot in the legal sense, because now I'm talking
Okay.
about stop and frisk under Terry
Right.
versus Ohio, or how it has morphed to be Kavanaugh stops. We can leave that aside for the moment.
Fair. Fair. Fair.
But the law says if a police officer has reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot, and somebody may be involved or may know something about it, you can stop
Mhm.
them and you can frisk them if there is some reason to believe they may be armed and dangerous. But it's a very temporary stop. You can ask a couple of questions to either confirm or dispel what it is you are briefly investigating. But even below that, Chris, is a knock and
Right.
talk. You can go to anybody's house, knock, and say, "Hey, sir, we'd like to talk to you about a social media post." Now, that will never reach my desk unless it culminates in an arrest, and then they ask me to assess that arrest to see whether there's enough evidence to charge, to indict. But it's probably never going to get to my desk. What I hate to see is law enforcement agencies act abusively by having no reason to perform the knock and talk in the first instance. Because
Right.
if somebody puts something that is scorched earth on social media, criticizing federal government officials up one side, down the other, calling them every name in the book, that doesn't warrant knock and talk. If it bleeds over into a potential threat, then that could be a crime. Now, at a minimum, we're going to get a knock and talk. Maybe we're going to open a criminal investigation if there's adequate predication, enough evidence, and maybe even consider criminal charges if the
Right.
if the threat is direct, unambiguous, and there seems to be some present intent to do somebody harm. So, but yeah, I've just described to you and to our viewers the rules of law enforcement convention. This is the way it's supposed
Right.
to work, but we know this is not the way it's working under Donald Trump and his dirty DOJ leadership.
And I'll say just also for the viewers, as part of my role as a civilian who was in these channels monitoring on a regular basis, like a lot of people do, and I'm curious your feedback on this, is that we serve as eyes, civilian eyes in these sectors. We're also trained. We kind of know what we're looking at. And part of the training I got over a period of time was talking to enough federal, basically federal investigators who would say, "Well, man, it's really, call me back when, maybe a little bit more but that's thank you for telling me." And so eventually you start seeing what that line is where they can't really
Right.
do much. I don't like Senator so and so, and I just think he shouldn't be breathing anymore. All right. Eh, might want to talk, but this other guy says something far worse. Where do you see our security vulnerabilities are arising based in your experience, especially when our officials are so focused on these petty chases of Comey and 8647, or bad lawyers that they're sending into court? Where are we vulnerable now from your point of view?
The only place we're vulnerable is everywhere. And I don't say that to be
No
dramatic,
bad news there. Okay.
but
I know.
we are consumed, it seems. By we, I mean the dirty Department of Justice leadership. And I never say the dirty Department of Justice, because there are still some 90 to 100,000 career
Sure.
public servants there who were there before Donald Trump. And God willing, unless they are unlawfully fired by Todd Blanche, as he has unlawfully fired so many, and they
Right.
don't self-select because they can no longer endure working for a corrupt regime, then God willing, they will be there after Donald Trump falls from power, whether that is before or at the end of his current presidential term. Um, but it is the dirty DOJ leadership that is the problem. And they are diverting and devoting so many resources, so many man and woman hours of both investigators and prosecutors to doing Donald Trump's revenge. that it is
Right.
that there's legitimate law enforcement work going undone that is putting America at risk across the board. I don't care if it's civil rights work that is going undone. I don't care if it's environmental crimes or environmental enforcement. Those are two different divisions. Work that is
The
going undone. We know there's public corruption work that
the
is going
financial
undone.
crimes are, I can't
Financial
imagine someone in
crimes, the
that
violent
like,
crimes, the drug crimes, the gun crimes, you name it. It is going undone. Not all of it, but when you take, for example, 1,000 FBI agents and divert them to look for Donald Trump's name in the Epstein files, they're being pulled
yeah.
away from, among other criminal investigations, child sex
And
trafficking
it, yeah, exactly,
cases.
right.
So yes, it's dangerous. It's all dangerous right now.
Oh my God. Your experience as a JAG officer brings me to our, let's do it like a nice bridge to Ukraine at this point. So I think about Pete Hegseth. We have a bunch of names for him here, but Drunk Pete, Captain Drunk. There's a lot of things the Ukrainians would call him. Um, but the way he so flippantly, throws off the laws of war with his braggadocio, the way the United States government is now being weaponized, just randomly across the globe with soldiers who have to follow orders. I live in a country where they're really holding a line when it comes to capturing Russians. I know they want to smack a guy upside the head. I'm sure it does happen. But I also know there are prosecutions when that happens. And I see a standard here in front of me that just keeps me sane. And I look back at my country and I'm losing it. So your JAG officer side, looking at what's happened in Iran, what sets off your biggest alarms with these guys?
And yeah, I honor the military. I loved my 6.5 years active duty. I left reluctantly only because I was going to be promoted out of the courtroom, and I had decided I never wanted to leave the courtroom. So I left the Army and joined the Department of Justice. Um, you know, we have war crimes that have been perpetrated, that continue to be perpetrated, and it is murdering people in international waters. It is
Mhm.
invading countries with no lawful authority. It is running an unconstitutional war in Iran presently. And, not to mention Pete Hegseth literally retaliating against military officers for either speaking the truth, like Senator Mark Kelly and 5 other members of
Right.
Congress did when they simply accurately recited what is contained in both the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the Manual for Courts Martial. That's our procedural Bible as JAGs,
Yeah.
that military members must disobey unlawful orders. Can you imagine if they had to obey unlawful orders, like shoot all those pregnant women who are coming across the border, which is something Donald Trump was urging his military to do during his first term? Can you imagine where our military would be? So, Pete Hegseth, I hope at some point is held accountable in a court of law for what he is doing. And I started with, I honor the men and women of the military, but I'm also disappointed in military leadership that they have opted not to disobey some of the unlawful orders handed down from Donald Trump through Pete Hegseth. That's something that,
Right.
they will have to be held accountable for eventually. But when I saw this defining moment when I saw both Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump address our military leadership and Donald Trump say things like, I want you to use American cities as war training grounds. I don't understand. And I think, Chris, I would value your opinion on this. He's building a
By all
bunker.
means.
He's building a bunker. And I think it
Yes.
may come down to whether the military keeps a corrupt, criminal, unconstitutional president in power when it is
Mhm.
the last ditch effort of Donald Trump to hold on to power down in that bunker he's building for himself. I want to believe the military will hold strong and remain loyal to its oath to the Constitution and not an oath to dear leader.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's one of the things I've learned being here. I've been here since January 2022, and I was coming fresh off the Jan 6 era. So, watching our country go through what's happening in America and then arriving here, I'd studied a lot of the region, but I hadn't lived here. So like it's been a full immersion. And one of the things that I see such a huge difference between Ukrainian people after Yanukovych in 2014 is that they're not going to put up with that shit, you know? So there's a preference for Valery Zaluzhny, the current ambassador to UK, who was our commander in chief before Sersky was ultimately became commander in chief of armed forces. And the reason why they like Zaluzhny is that he represents a strength of America of the Ukrainian character in war that doesn't play games of any kind. And this is really about the kind of part of the sector that's not really all happy with Zelensky all the time. And I did get a Ukrainian admit today. I said, but has Zelensky ever been perceived as mean? Oh, no, no, it's not that. Exactly. Donald Trump's mean. Well, yes, he is. So, so some people may disagree with Zelensky just for whatever reason, but Zaluzhny is really respected for being a great military commander, calm, the type of guy. Now, that matters when I turn over back on the TV in America and I see Trump's falling asleep, Pete Hegseth's an idiot, and just the the clash between those two images is night and day, right? So, to why Pete Hegseth would have to fortify or Trump with this bunker under the ballroom, I guess. Yeah, I mean, no one here is going to have to hide from the people. They couldn't hide from the people; they wouldn't get away with it. They had underground, 400 feet underground, to hide from the Russian bombs that will never hit. All those, those missiles you see on the news all the time,
Yeah.
where Russia is going to take out the leadership. That's impossible. The leadership is 400 feet below ground. I've been in those areas. They're not going to get them. There's nothing they have big enough to hit deep enough to take out the leadership. So, what are they doing in D.C. that they think is going to take out, protect the leadership from any of those things? Nothing. But they can use it to basically buffer from us, I guess. Those of us who want to keep our country. I
Yeah.
don't know who else they're
Keep,
protecting from.
and I don't want to flip the script, but I would love to hear,
Please,
Chris,
of
like
course,
what
man.
what is it that compelled you to move to Ukraine? And then, I mean, this is an impossibly big question, but how do you see the arc of the war from the time you've been there, and where do you think things are now, and how do you see things trending? I've only been to Ukraine once. The Department of Justice sent me there to
Right.
lecture back in about 2000. I think they were trying to ratify a new constitution that provided for an independent
Yeah.
judiciary and a jury trial. I had the incredible good fortune to lecture to the Procuracy Academy, where they send lawyers to become
Cool. Cool.
prosecutors. And I
Yeah.
lectured to all of the homicide detectives for the city of Kyiv. And I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Um, but how do you see things trending moving forward, given kind of where the conflict is now? And then I definitely want to talk about how Donald Trump is not the best negotiator, because he promised us he was going to end the war on day one, and corporate media never pushes him on that, to our extreme detriment and your extreme detriment.
Yeah, well, it's sort of an accident that I got here in a little bit of sense. I mean, I'd worked on the case as someone covering disinformation. I always qualify it like this. I was neck deep in trying to track ISIS propaganda, and literally got a request from, I think it was Newsweek back in 2014, about the advanced propaganda of ISIS. I said, "Oh, no, no, no! You got to look at the Russian propaganda about Ukraine." And I just went back down into my smaller band of non-nation state active terrorism. Right? I figured nation states had that shit covered, but I did pay attention to it. Right? And I'm 56, so I'm old enough to have since a Cold War era. I almost said no. I did actually initially said no for 15 minutes. Girlfriend says, "But it's Ukraine." I said yes at the end of that sentence. And I was here for the month before the full scale started. Met some amazing people, saw amazing country, knew that this country had to defend itself, knew I had to be a witness to it. It like the moment basically my feet hit the ground, I was in. There was nothing, there was no part of my consciousness that would say do anything else. I'd actually only been gone 46 days after in the first year, only 46 days total. Now, what have I learned that I think is so important is a couple of things. One, this country's been fighting for its existence forever, even before it became a country. Um, and it has gone through a lot of changes from its independence till now that we forgot. when we did Independence Day the other day, and I caught your independence message, for instance, and a lot of ours did. We forgot that, and I tell Ukrainians all the time, we don't know that feeling. Sorry, we don't remember the king. We don't remember like having to guys, please stop thanking me. Thank you, and we'll see you in August. And it just was really hard because I saw people with fresh commitment to really have a decent job, have a nice little apartment, not super wealthy, not beyond ridiculous ambition, good ambition. Especially in the sense of this kind of entrepreneurial take care of ourselves thing that you now see Donald Trump to talk about Trump. Donald Trump just announced today he would allow Ukraine to develop Patriots, which has not happened anywhere. Literally, they shot that down a couple weeks ago. But what he sees is that this country is that little mighty might that's not given up. And it's like, it's the prototype of our own myth about ourselves.
Yeah.
They're for real in front of us. That's what I see. Last part is the corruption model. I did it when I kept hearing this term when I got here. It's not my area. My area is like extremism, terrorism, and disinformation studies. But I kept hearing this word. I had to figure out what did this mean, because I do know one thing about corruption is it exists in different parts of the world in different ways. So I had to figure out what does that mean here. And the thing I had an epiphany on was I was looking at what's called the Transparency Corruption Index, that all countries kind of get a scorecard every year, really from the super sized big investors. Do I want to do any money in Zimbabwe, or Russia or America? And America is going down. I mean, it is on a steep decline. Slovakia is going down. Hungary is going down. Bulgaria is going down. Chris, how do you remember who's going down? Because it's all of the ones who talk shit about Ukraine who's actually steadily going up. And why does it matter? Because Russia's at the bottom. Russia is like the corruption model. That's it. That's where everyone's trying to magnetize to that. Why? Let me ask you this, my friend who's a prosecutor. What does corruption do? What is it about corruption we have to be so mindful of, that the reason why Russia wants that and that why we have to pull Ukraine out of it is because once corruption starts permeating every part of society, every country, then autocracy is the only thing that prevails. Totalitarian and abuse is the only thing prevails. And here, they've had enough of it. That's the answer.
And how do you see the trajectory of the struggle and the war? And are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How are you feeling about the prospect for the future of Ukraine?
I have a lot of hope in Ukraine, or nothing but like faith and beauty for Ukraine itself. I know it's going to be painful. We need manpower. We need human power to physically have the things that can be done done. That's the big reality. But the innovation, the awareness, the determination, the focus, the drive, the understanding, all those things are present. What it needs is resources. It's needed it from day one, and every time the resources showed up, Ukraine delivered. That's why Trump's kind of going, I guess they do have cards, is because if the information's there, if the resources are there, and if the support is there. And they said from the beginning, we don't need you to come fight and die for us. If you could just make sure you give us what we need. But people have come here and died. I actually I went to a funeral that I was requested to photograph for a 23-year-old Brit whose mom just sacrificed him to freedom. And how she holds that is how we should all hold that. She knew what he was here for. She was proud of what he had done, not for just Ukraine, but for all of us. And the fact that the West is not sending anybody, I mean, this war's gone on longer than World War II. We're approaching longer than World War One. Or actually, no, correction. I think we tied World War One recently. We're at 1,600 days this weekend. All right, and in 1,600 days, Russia couldn't defeat this country that basically started off with a corrupt army 12 years ago and has now rebuilt itself while being pounded. And develop technology that everyone's going, hey, I kind of would like that drone tech you've got, that AI targeting you have, that laser tech. And by the way, how did you repair your electrical grid while you're being bombed? You see, it's how it's flipped. It's sort of a weird, it's a very weird birth of a reality in our modern time that I don't know if it'll take me a while to unravel the words of what has happened that's beautiful inside of this terrible thing. I've seen war crimes. I mean, I was at 2 mass graves in the first year. I've seen buildings collapse with people screaming to get rescued. 15 times last year, 6 times this year, and 4 times in the last month in my neighborhood, no less.
And I
But they
hesitate to,
keep focusing on it. Yeah, they keep focusing on it. Go ahead, bro.
yeah, and what is the casualty rate like at this point? I mean, I see what I see. I watch your
Oh,
feed.
and it's getting higher. Yeah, it's getting higher. Yeah.
Yeah. And am I right? Because I am never confident that we're getting straight news from any sort of corporate media outlet. Not that they're all
Right.
corrupt. I'm not suggesting that, but I don't think they've all been up to the task. Certainly in the age of
No,
Trump.
no.
But the affirmative strikes, the offensive strikes that I see Ukraine committing successfully against Russia oil refineries
Correct.
and all
Correct.
is that something that is ratcheting up? Is it something that is, slowing
In
down? What's your
fact, it
take
is.
there?
In, in fact, it is. I have a map that's on my UA mission site, which is an auxiliary site. It's just data. And I map all of the strikes from the very beginning, and I routinely go back over them and back over them, meaning I go back through 2022 data, even though I've already done it. 22. I do it over and over again constantly. There's some new layer I didn't think about. No, we're not only expanding how to hit, what to hit, but one of the things I say very important to understand about Ukrainians, different than Russians, is because resources are so tight, you can pretty much guarantee what they're hitting has to have an effect on stopping the war. And a great example was when everyone was, oh, well, they should just hit the parade, right? That would so upset Putin. And one of the commanders here, Robert Magyar, who's in charge of all the unmanned ground forces, um, he says, it doesn't serve any tactical purpose, though.
Hmm.
And he very clearly said it to 2 or 3 Ukrainian enemies. He's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but and that's important to understand because what Ukraine is saying with limited resources and a very finite amount of pull in the world right now at this moment is that they have to hit precisely at these areas. And I watched them doing that. And I'm going to shoot down some Republicans because they lie sometimes. And I don't know if you know that. But in Congress, the former general before Pete Hegseth, a substandard um, downgrade, if you will, from uh, Lloyd Austin III. Lloyd Austin III sat in Congress and was asked about oil strikes on oil facilities in 2024. And he says, we understand they'll have a knock-on effect, but, we advise the Ukrainians to take appropriate action against, military targets. And everyone determined that meant, he said, don't hit oil facilities. And I said, that's funny. Last time I checked, he had a lot of stars on that shoulder and that shoulder. That means he knows that oil facility is legit. And he just answered yourself in a straightforward bureaucratic way that only a twisting guy looking for a soundbite would have missed what he said, which is, of course there were the targets. Duh. And with Operation Cobweb or Spiderweb, sometimes it's called, where the SBU permeated throughout Russian territory in multiple locations, then launched their drones inside territory. If you don't think that's about to happen again, well, you're just not paying attention because who knows Russians better than Ukrainians? I have Ukrainian friends that can do perfect Russian accents at a level that they've had to do interrogations with Russian soldiers they captured and began to just go, yeah, man, I was captured and they do their thing and eventually goes like, yeah, wait, you sound like from my village. Oh yeah, no, well, sort of close. And only Ukrainians could do that. No
Mm.
one from Ohio could pull that off. Only a Ukrainian could get that far up to Moscow, pull the truck over. Yeah, brat, dobre, and just whoops, let them out. There goes the birds. And they do it with such amazing finesse. I have to avoid being like fanboy of it and just focus on task because it does get to be a little bit like a big hoorah on a day like we just got hit. And then you see that we hit back like, yes. And the truth is, pound for pound, if you think about what Ukraine is taking out in Russian territory versus what Russia is taking out here, we care about our people. There's not one citizen that dies here, no matter what age, whatever status, none that is not mourned. We have literally days of mourning. Every few days we have another day of mourning. But we know that they're not stopping the country. They're not hitting anything that's stopping this country from defending itself. But Russia literally is having to move its air defense forces from the front now back to Moscow over to St. Petersburg and stuff. We were doing all along.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
that's a weakness
It's
on
encouraging. It's
Russia's
encouraging.
side. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, man. Yeah, it's hell, man. And I will say this to our American friends and to you, my man. Ukraine loves you guys. Like Ukraine loves America. They love America. They actually will tell me when I'm pessimistic, "Oh no, 70% still like us." Yeah, 9. I'm the one because the cynic and the it's a little turned off. Like, yeah, But the truth is, I know you guys are fighting, and I mean it, Glenn. Like, there's a handful of you that came out of the government that were not media people, and you've come out and you've really embraced this audience, and they've embraced you right back, and they need you as much as you need them to tell them where to go. And let's land it on this, and you can always come back plenty of times. You can always ask me anything you want about Ukraine anytime. I love to talk about Ukraine. I see in our viewers right now something that I think you and I both really appreciate, which is why I brought up that cruise, is that they're hungry for good information, quality information, and more importantly, they want something better. But what I want from them is how to activate them. So that's what I want from your final big thought, because you're so good at this. What is activating the people? What do you see that activates them the most? And how do they have to get this democracy back by being active versus just
Yeah.
kind of hoping someone real smart says something real smart today?
Yeah, so I think, as I say, this is not a time for us to be sitting on the sidelines. Everybody has to be in the game. One of the sayings that I fall back on often is, justice is a team sport, and we all have
Mhm.
to be on the field. We all have to be in the game. I do think injustice motivates people, and I can tell you that because over the years that I've been doing this, and Chris, this is not what I had on my bingo card when I retired from the Department of Justice. I did not
I
think I
know,
would
right?
be I didn't think I'd be running my mouth on TV for 6.5 years
You
as a
got a
legal
million.
analyst.
Do you have a plaque on your wall that says a million?
They say, yeah, so YouTube sends you a plaque at 100,000, they send you a silver plaque,
You
at a
earned it,
million,
bro.
they send you a gold plaque, and we just keep building. If you build it, they will come and they keep coming. And I have so many people who lash out at me not because they're upset with me or what I'm saying or my analysis, but they're like, Glenn, you keep saying justice matters. It's the name of your channel. You say it every damn day at the beginning of your video, at the end of your video, but it doesn't matter. Look at what they're doing. Nobody's been. And I would always say, you know what? The way you're reacting to injustice tells me
Hmm.
that justice matters to you. You wouldn't be so flippin' furious at the injustice if it didn't matter. You know it matters. And so what people can do, I'm, not the be all and end all of civic engagement, but I mean, there are so many things that we hear all the time. And I want to say it's easy. You know, contact all of your elected officials all the time and let them know what you want them to do, what you want them to focus on, what you want their priorities to be. So many of my
Right.
friends and our team justice members, our community members will say, yeah, but Glenn, I'm in a blue state. So they're already doing what I think they should be doing. I said, well, that's not a reason not to call them. Maybe you
Yeah.
call them and you tell them, I appreciate what you're doing, but you know what I would really love you to do? You eat at the same congressional cafeteria as the Republicans. You travel those same underground fancy little trains with the Republic. You work out in the same congressional gyms with the
Right.
Republicans. You wine with them. You dine with them. Will you please pressure them in every way you can to care
Right.
about democracy, to care about the rule of law and the Constitution, to care about their own constituents? It's not just about, well, you're a Dem, so you share my ideology. That's beside the point. Everybody needs to be in the justice game. And I tell people, you know what? Contact everybody from your town council member and, your city administrator and your town mayor and your elected officials in the state house in your state and the governor's office and all of your elected officials in Washington. It's not just let me call my representative or my senator once a week. Get involved in ways that are easy. My wife, my better three quarters, she's the brains of the operation, as everybody who ever tunes into a community meeting knows. She was a
Right.
career immigration lawyer helping people live the American dream forever. She's now retired, and it's just the two of us in this team Justice Matters thing that we're doing. Um, she is forever writing postcards and participating in all kinds of local activism endeavors, and that's her comfort level. Of course, you can protest, but here's the other thing, and you can obviously donate to your candidates. But I get sick of I'm inundated daily with give me $10, give me $20. Do you know, Chris? There are so many nonprofit organizations that are in court every damn day, kicking the butt of the Trump administration and its dirty Department of Justice leadership. In a very real sense, they're fighting for our rights in court and they're winning, but we don't
Right.
retain them as our lawyers. We don't pay them. But they are, I mean, the birthright citizenship case. I mean, that was won by, among other great organizations, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, the Asian Law Caucus, the Democracy Defenders Fund, Norm Eisen's group. They sprinted into court to fight for birthright citizenship for all infants born in the United States, and they won. You know what? we don't we don't send them $20. We don't volunteer our services to raise money for them. We don't think about that intuitively, but damn it, they're our lawyers in a very real sense, and they're winning for us. Contact any one of these agencies and say, you know what, I may only have $20 to give you, but I'm a retired accountant. Can I help you with your accounting services? Or I'll do a door knock campaign for you, or I'll phone bank for you. You can do all those things for elected officials, but you know what? They usually have plenty of money filling their campaign coffers. Do it for the lawyers who are fighting for our rights. That was a non-exhaustive list that I just laid out there. The
Yeah, yeah.
democracy forward. That is Sky Perryman's group. I believe she's brought more legal challenges, her organization, than any other group, and has kicked Trump's butt up one side and down the other. So help those organizations because they're helping us.
Yeah, I was kind of laughing with a friend of mine. I asked her after I apologized. I said, "I'm so sorry I called you zombies. Why'd you call me zombies?" Well, I was a little upset. What do you mean? Well, you were telling me you hope someone else would solve something, and that's just the person I'm going to throw to the zombies first, so I save everyone else. What? Well, it was amongst friends, right? Because I would never let that happen to this person. But over time, we kept having this conversation, and I said, she says, "But I don't have your skills, Chris. You know, you just do so many things. I do this." And I said, "Okay, can you remove a do me a favor? Yeah. I want you to put a box on the right side of the table. Yeah. Now pick the box up and move it to the left side of the table. Can you do that?" She goes, "Yeah." Cool. We got a bunch of tasks for you. And I'll call you later. I got off the phone. And then we talked about 4 or 5 hours later, and I said, "Do you know why I'm playing games with you like this? What? Because that's how we're surviving in the war. Okay, grandmas here mix Molotov cocktails, or as we call them, Banderovski schmoozies. So we have these things that people do here that seem like grandmas sitting waving nets that are catching drones in the east. We have entire corridors of roads that are surrounded by these nets to catch drones. That there's a lot of ladies in these towns that are sitting there weaving those nets together.
There you
So
go.
if you take that across to America and say, "Do you have to make nets to keep drones going down through California right now?" No. God
Yeah,
bless, at least right now. Hopefully never. But you could apply that metaphor to other categories and say,
yeah.
"Now I see what you mean." And sure enough, this friend did call me. She goes, "I see a lot of areas where I'm pleading instead of acting." I said, "That's exactly the point. Pleading causes paralysis. It just basically is a form of policy paralysis that you just like. That's what cognitive warfare is all about: is shutting us down, keeping us from feeling like we can do anything. And your viewers and my viewers, they're smarter than that.
Taking
You know?
action is therapeutic. Engaging is therapeutic, And when it comes to voting, I saw Bubba Johns and some others saying, and vote. Yeah,
Yeah.
listen, go help people register or help them check to make sure the registration hasn't been purged. Have election parties where you just get, you fill your car up with people who are going to the polls, get them to the polls. Just there are so many things that you can do. And whatever your comfort level is, you can find a way to engage. And engaging is therapeutic. It will make you feel good. It will make you feel strong. It'll make you feel like, you know what? You're not on the sidelines. You're in the damn game.
And you made a good point with Dean's conversation earlier. I'm gonna make it here. First, we're gonna both say to Chris Palomino, "I love that design, don't you? Didn't Chris Palomino deliver you a great design?" I told her I was gonna embarrass.
Well, let's there is Chris Palomino's design. Justice matters, sport. with the Statue of Liberty holding Donald Trump up by the gruff of his neck, screaming at him. Yeah, this is Chris's work right here. I bought T-shirts from Chris, as did a lot of our other community members. Chris is a gem.
By the way, for our script tonight, that was actually the only thing on the script. The rest is improvised because I knew. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I want to say something that we needed to say earlier. I'm a journalist who works in Ukraine on Substack directly for my viewers, and really, to be honest, it's sort of inverse. I work for Ukrainians. You guys all help me work for Ukrainians. But Glenn is one of these great experts who left that corporate news media thing, and I'm glad you did. I really did to come here and work with us. And you may think, Glenn, with 1 million viewers, I do know a little bit about metrics at YouTube. It's not as profitable as people think. So please do a paid subscription with Glenn. And thank you for being here, brother. And make sure that everyone's tuning into your briefings because we need them. You're like our vigil keeper at 8:30 every night.
Yeah, well, thank you for Chris, for kind of bringing to us what's going on in Ukraine, because corporate media has not been up to the task, and I could use stronger words to describe my disappointment in the fourth estate and corporate media. I was a journalism major undergrad. I revered both the
Okay.
study of journalism and the practice of journalism, but I think independent media, like you, like me, like Dean, like so many of our friends, is the wave of the present, not the wave of the future. Straight to the people, no corporate sponsorship. And, we are going to be part of what helps American democracy
Right.
survive.
Thank you, my man. See you
Thank you,
soon.
Chris. All right.
Bless everybody. See you soon. Слава Україні, героям слава і пиздець Російської Федерації.